tonight you have two topics actually. The main one is on educational review. We're basically dealing with a presentation by Ambassador Leo Kran, Minister for Education, at a media press conference held in Accra, and basically a lot of issues have come up that there's this establishment, or at least there's the intended establishment of 200 community day senior high schools to expand access in the country, and currently 2,300 schools under trees are being upgraded. 3 million school uniforms, you are told, have been actually provided to pupils across the country, and also that there's a new students loan scheme in the offing. We'll be getting to understand what is going into that. We've been talking about capitation grant for some time. We are told that the grant for the second and third terms of 2010-2011 academic year to basic schools across the country have been paid, amounting to 50 million cedis, 50 million Ghana cedis, I should say, with an additional 8 million Ghana cedis, which also has been paid for the first term of the 2011-2012 academic year. So we basically will also be looking at the Education Strategic Plan, ESP. What does it mean? What are its main components? Has the NDC, as a government, lived up to its promise with regard to improving the quality of delivery of education in this country at all levels, or is it just a matter of political talk, as some people like us to believe? Basically, you can send your views on the matter to 1760 by text across all mobile networks. If you're on Facebook, facebook.com/multi-TV world. The second leg of our show, where we'll be dealing with the matter quite hastily, is with regard to the matter that was taken to court. You all know about it, with regard to Mr. Jacob Echebi Lamte, as to whether really he could purchase a building, a flat that he had lived in, and what really were the conditions, what were the terms of it. And today, the Supreme Court really passed its judgment on the matter. We'll be looking at it. We hope to be speaking to Honorable Aiko Otu, who is the counsel for Mr. Echebi Lamte, former Attorney General. I'm sure you know that. And then Honorable Patrick Omanibuama will also be speaking to him. He's Deputy Minister for Youth and Sports. All right, so the Deputy Minister is already on the line. Good evening to you, Honorable Omanibuama.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let me find out from you. I am sure you were in court today.
Yes, I was in court.
Personally.
Yes, please.
What do you make of the judgment? I mean, what happened in court today? What was expectation dashed? How did you take it?
Yeah, a very good evening to your cherished viewers. Robert, my brother Okujeto and I embarked on this journey out of love of country. We have nothing to benefit from it personally. As we speak now, we are living in government bungalows. Tomorrow, per this ruling, we can decide to apply for our bungalows or the land on which the bungalow is situated, if this ruling is allowed to stand. So as the ruling was delivered, and it was by a 6-3 decision, our view is that we respect the decision of the highest court of the land. We respect the court, but we vehemently disagree with the judgment. If this judgment, which we have said is a malignant spreading tumor, is allowed to stand, doctors who are living in government bungalows can begin to apply for their bungalows. The headmaster of Pusiga Training College can apply for it. The headmaster of Presec can apply for it. The head teacher of your own school, Achimota, can also apply for her bungalow. The president can also decide to apply for the castle. Somebody may apply for the National Theatre. This is the kind of chaotic situation that, if this ruling is allowed to stand, we are going to have in the country if people begin to go in the line of Honorable Jacob Echebi Lamte. Because of that, we are of the view that we must embark on every legitimate action to ensure that we seek a reversal of this decision by the highest court of the land. As a result, very, very early next week, we are going to outline series of activities and actions that we are going to embark upon to ensure the reversal of this decision that we have described as a malignant spreading tumor. Let me also add that in your introduction, I heard you introduce Honorable Ayikwe Otu as a counsel for Honorable Jacob Lamte. Let me put on record that never in the course of the trial were we ever told that Honorable Ayikwe Otu was representing Honorable Jacob Lamte. It was Mr. Radero, Mr. R.O. Solomon, and one other gentleman who always were representing him. It is possible that he is his personal counsel, but in this particular matter, we never heard him being introduced as the counsel for Honorable Jacob Lamte.
I'll just stay on the line because Honorable Ayikwe Otu has actually just joined us on the telephone line as well. Good evening to you, Mr. Ayikwe Otu.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us. Basically, I'd like to ask you for a little background into this matter. You'll be surprised that sometimes we tend to assume that everybody knows what we've been talking about, what has been happening, and so we go ahead with the discussion from the center. Can you give us a little background as to what has really culminated in what we're discussing tonight with regard to the Supreme Court's decision today?
Well, very well. Let's say that the long and short of it is that the two gentlemen who went to court alleged that for Mr. Jacob Lamte to have bought property which is public property, he had somehow engaged in conflict of interest situation, or they can smell some corruption, and on the part of the Lands Commission, they also think that they did not act candidly. So this was the issue before the court, whether a public property could be sold. In those days, the idea was that to a minister, but it turns out that at the time he bought the property, in fact, he had resigned. So it was sold to him in his capacity as a private member and no longer a public official.
So let me get this clearly. Again, there were questions about forum in the general discussion of minds in the society,
Yes.
And how come the Supreme Court and which other courts had been involved in this and what is happening. Was there a constitutional matter and all of that? Are you able to throw some light on that?
Well, you know, you are yourself a lawyer. You know that you need local standi to go to courts. But then the view has now emerged that there's something we call public interest litigation, in which case, if you are able to show that there's sufficient public interest in the matter, then the Supreme Court may, on that score, rule that you have the capacity to prosecute the claim before them. So when the two went initially, I think an objection was taken that they did not have sufficient local standards. So a preliminary objection was raised, but the Supreme Court said there was sufficient public interest in the matter, and therefore it was going to go into the matter. Today, on the issue of conflict of interest, what the Supreme Court said was that it has held previously that in conflict of interest situations, the proper forum is the Shuraj, that's the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice.
Interesting. Omane Boama, who we've been speaking to before you joined us, and I'll go back to him. I have good reason for asking you 3 questions in a row, has said that this is a very, very wrong, I mean, to use a medical term, because he is a medical doctor, said that it was some kind of a malignant tumor that we are allowing to grow. And he actually cited examples where he says that the head teacher of my former school, of my secondary school, Achimota, can actually apply for the government bungalow in Achimota and take it to become a private property. The president, perhaps, even for the castle, and some other ministers. Or, from what you have just said, people who probably have resigned that position could also apply for bungalows that they lived in whilst they served in public office. And then those bungalows that are meant to be for government use, because if Omane Boama is reshuffled, and for example, is no more a minister, then he may apply for the government bungalow in which he's living now. And that is what the Supreme Court is saying. Is that the correct position?
Yes. The gentleman.
Hello. We seem to have lost Honorable Ikweochu, but I'm sure we'll get him back on the line. Honorable Omanibwana, are you with me?
Yes, please, I'm with you.
Thank you. Forgive me for keeping you there for some time because I just wanted to get some clarification on those issues. But my next question to you really was that you said within the next few days that you are going to outline steps to ensure the reversal of what the decision of the Supreme Court. What steps do you have in mind?
We are not. Let me emphasize once again that these are all legitimate and legal steps within the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana that you will outline. And it will be very, very early next week in a press conference. It will not rule out seeking a judicial review on this particular matter. It is interesting, particularly if you listen to the minority, that is the three, as Justice Atuguba made incursions into a very key aspect of the law that Justice Brobe relied copiously on, which had to do with the law of evidence. What happened in court was that we had come to the conclusion that we were not going to take oral evidence and cross-examination and all that. And so by so doing, both parties had accepted the documents submitted as valid. Today in court, Justice Brobe, who himself is a don and a guru in the law of evidence, was rather contesting some of these evidences that had been already accepted by both parties. And Justice Atuguba made incursions into it, even including importing some other persuasive views from the English law and all that. For me, one of the key things that Justice Brobe, even though he ruled against us, raised had to do with the fact that he said, if I had my own way, the blocks of flats that will be developed on this land must be put to the use of medical doctors. The question which naturally flows from this is that if it must be put to the use of medical doctors, or let's say other public officials, other government officials, is it better to keep the land in the hands of government so that even if flats are developed on them, rents will not be at commercial rates, or it is better to put it in the hands of a private person who may decide to charge $3,000, $2,000, $4,000, and these same doctors or nurses may not be able to rent them. The other issue which also arises has to do with this thing was done within the Accra redevelopment project that was embarked upon under the previous administration. We are all aware that the redevelopment project had to do specifically with properties that had been run down. You and I know that in the year 2001, Honorable Dr. Dulante's bungalow was renovated at the taxpayer's expense. And so that property could not have been said to have been run down. It is possible that it is the land that he is interested in, but the fact of the matter is that the land can also not be distinguished from the property. We are saying that, look, it is not in the interest of Mother Ghana for us to allow this law, this ruling, which for now is law, to stand. If it stands, tomorrow, ministers, deputy ministers, both serving and past, can go and apply for their bungalows. Head teachers, senior house masters, security officers can also go and apply for their bungalows. What this will mean is that we will be grinding the state apparatus to a halt. This is a malignant spreading tumor that should not be allowed to stand. But like we have said, we respect the decision of the highest court of the land, but we vehemently disagree.
Let me get Honorable Ayikweoju's view on that, because that really was the question I asked him before his line tripped. Honorable Ikwetu, what's your response to that? That this actually opens the floodgates for government properties to simply, within a matter of time, to possibly all go into private hands?
I disagree violently with what the gentleman in the studio is telling you.
He's actually on the telephone line.
He's also on the phone line. Fine.
Right.
Let me. I told you I was driving when they called me.
Yes,
so
that's
I'm
right.
still in the traffic.
Okay.
You see, I disagree with him. We need to narrow down the issues. As we speak, the issue of Accra Development Scheme ought to be paramount in our minds. So it is not like people buying bungalows, but there is the Accra Redevelopment Scheme, in which a scheme by which certain bungalows in certain designated areas in Accra are being sold out for redevelopment. So Mr. Jacob Echebilamte has not bought that property to live in it. He's bought it as one of those houses which ought to be redeveloped. Have you got the point?
I can hear you on
Hello?
that. Yes. But redevelop for what purpose? Redevelop still
whatever
for...
it is,
Yes.
what the Constitution provides is that public lands are vested in the President of the Republic of Ghana.
Yes.
But because the President alone cannot manage everything, including lands, we have set up the Independent Lands Commission to deal with allocation and management of public lands. So it is the Lands Commission that made allocation to Jacob Echebilamte. He could have made it to any other person. Let us forget that. Let us discard from our minds that he bought this property because he lived in it previously and he wants to own it. It is not true. So that the headmaster of Achimota Secondary School, if it is not part of the Accra Redevelopment Scheme, cannot apply. I hope you've got a distinction.
I see the point that you were making as a matter of fact,
No,
legally.
I mean, you need to accept it as the position. It's not like a conjecture. He applied as part of the Accra Redevelopment Scheme, and it was properly allocated to him. So the question that was put to them was whether they did not see the leasehold agreement between the Lands Commission acting on behalf of the President of the Republic and Jacob Echebilamte.
It's interesting.
If they saw it, then
Yes.
the issue is this: was it properly made? If indeed official duty in law is presumed to have been officially done, then the onus was on them to show other motives apart from the fact that he applied for and he was given that plot.
That's omnia praesumunto rice acte acta.
Correct.
Absolutely. But let me come back to Honorable Manebuama. Honorable Manebuama, yes.
Can I come on a point of law here?
Please feel free. if you feel able to deal with the law.
Oh, at least the little that we have read from the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana.
Okay.
We know that in Article 20, Clause 6 of the 1992 Constitution,
Okay. Original owners.
and an organic matter.
Yes.
It says that where the property is not used in the public interest or for the purpose for which it was acquired, the owner of the property, immediately before the compulsory acquisition, shall be given the first option for acquiring the property, and shall on such reacquisition refund the whole or part of the compensation paid to him, as provided for by law, or such other amount as is commensurate with the value of the property at the time of the reacquisition. Assuming that we were not even interested in letting the Ga people who were the immediate owners of this particular land to have it, my next question is, what happens to the Public Procurement Act? What tendering process did this sale and acquisition go through under the NPP administration?
Interesting questions that you ask. Honorable Ikwetu, I'll take your final words on this. We have to bring the discussion to a close.
Yeah, let me answer him. You see, when the famous words of "there are many ways of killing a cat" were used, the Judges and Magistrates Conference met and issued a statement that a lawyer is as good as his brief. And therefore, if you do not go in for the best and you get some sort of advice, you might have misled yourself. You see, Article 25 and 6 have no relevance in what is happening because the Constitution has no retrospective effect. These laws on compulsory acquisition and payment of prompt compensation, and the fact that when the lands are taken and not used in the public interest, they are rather given to individuals, were part of our history. So that the new Constitution sought to say that from now onwards, what a young man will say, from today to go, from now onwards, from the 7th day of January 1993, if you acquire a piece of land, you should pay adequate compensation. And if you are not able to use it for the purpose for which it is taken, then you have to give it back to the owners. Ask Mr. Omanibuama. I believe that Mr. Jacob Echevilamte's property is older than himself. But Omanibuama will be older than the Constitution. So the laws that he is citing, for which they went to court, were completely inapplicable. And the Supreme Court said that in an earlier decision having to do with
that's a Lavani case.
The wireless acquisition.
Absolutely.
The Supreme Court made it clear that those articles had no retrospective effect. So why is Mr. Dr. Omanibuama still believe to date that when they went to court, they had a good brief basing themselves on Article 25 in respect of a property which is older than himself?
Honorable Senior, I have to say a big thank you to you for joining us tonight.
Hello.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Honorable Omanibuama, I'll take your final words.
Yeah, I wish you didn't allow him to go because I deliberately...
He's probably still on.
...went for the combined effect of Article 25, 26, and the Public Procurement Act. Deliberately. And that is why I said that even if you do not want to give it to the gas, what tendering process did this sale and acquisition go through? I deliberately merged the Article 25 and 6 and that of the Public Procurement Act. What he has done is to deliberately avoid the Public Procurement Act. If the learned former Attorney General can address the issue of the Public Procurement Act's adherence, because it was not for nothing that I coupled the two.
Interesting point that you make there. I'll be happy if you will find time to join us in the studio. So we'll do an extended discussion of this matter. But enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Education review is what we are doing right now. In the studio with us tonight, we have some old guards. They're not new to the show. On my immediate left, Mr. Charles Chega is Deputy Director General, Ghana Education Service. Thank you for coming, sir. And from the far end of the table, Kofi Asare is Executive Director, Action for Rural Education. It's good to see you again, Kofi. Basically, let's get into this review, and based on what the Honorable Minister presented, it's quite a number of things. But Education Strategic Plan, ESP 2010 to 2020, what does it encompass? What's the key focus? Mr. Chega, I'll begin with you.
Well, Education Strategic Plan 2010 to 2020 is actually in legal terms, you might call an amendment of the original Education Strategic Plan 2003 to 2015. And that reorganization, for that matter, was made essentially to enable the education sector capture the new and emerging ideas that had come into the delivery of education following the revised education reform in 2000. Okay. So that sought to capture some of the new thinking and new ideas that had been introduced because of the education reform.
And as a quick follow-up to that, so what are the highlights? What's going to happen with regard to this? So I mean, still, because people talk about school under trees and all of that in my introduction, I made reference to that. What are the main areas, the heads, that will be captured under this new plan?
Yeah, the new plan looks at essentially three areas. It looks first at something that we call the socio-humanistic part. And the socio-humanistic part is looking at how to how to place education and deliver it in a manner that it addresses both the social and the human requirements for people's development and national development.
Okay.
It also has an education part that says that what are the things we are going to deliver so that people get value in terms of their education. And then it looks at the economic dimensions and seek to ensure that people are trained in line with the economic aspirations of the country. In other words, to say that you are producing the human resource that is relevant to the development of education.
Okay, great. Kofi, let me come to you and ask you. So, what do you make of this plan? Is it do you think that this amendment is necessary in the first place?
Yeah, I think like any other plan, as you progress in implementing an increment one, it gets to a point where you need to review the plan, re-strategize, and then incorporate emerging issues into the plan. And as you rightly said, there was an education reform in 2007. And also there was an education law in 2008, Act 778. And it was necessary to incorporate all these two key landmarks in the education system into the Education Strategic Plan 2015 to ensure that it is reflective of the issues raised in both the new education reform 2007 and the education law and other emerging issues in education. So, and to the extent that the Ministry of Education was very, very participatory in the consultative processes that led to the development of this plan. It is not just a plan that was cooked in the private. They consulted civil society far and wide. It took about 3 years of extensive consultation to develop each of the priority areas, each of the thematic areas, and the focus, the direction, and every other aspect of this plan, to the extent that we don't see it as just a Ministry of Education document, but we actually, if I say we, civil society actually owns the document because of the extensive involvement that civil society.
Okay, so Charles, let me take you to some of the issues raised by the Honorable Minister, so we can begin to deal with them. In the first place, I mean, it's quite a number, and I know our time is a bit quite spent. I have to choose and pick as we deal with these. But we cannot run away from 65,000 junior high school teachers in the country benefiting from government's free school laptop project by the end of 2012. That was mentioned and that was cited. Really, how critical is that? Because the question some are raising is that there may be some practical challenges there. Powering these laptops across the length and breadth of the country may be an issue. Some may have it for cosmetic purposes. They may not be able to use it. Again, how does that impact the lives of their students or pupils, as the case may be, and all of that? Of what benefit is that? I've heard an argument that perhaps you should have diverted that to the students or the pupils rather, and found an alternative power source to make them use or deal with it.
Well, anybody who says that certainly does not understand government's desire and determination to ensure that we expand the scope and the use of ICT as part of our economic development and human development processes. And we are all aware of what happens in many public schools. Public schools are not that resourced in terms of the ICT efforts. And so this particular plan or intervention by government intended largely to ensure that the public schools don't lose out. Once the education reform had introduced the fact that ICT is a subject that is going to be examined, then it was right for government to ensure that every child in JHS, at least has some level of exposure, to a computer, and therefore can understand some of the things that are being said. And let me just, a passing joke. I mean, I was in Ashanti region, and one little girl in a basic school was talking about the days before their school had a computer. And this teacher was teaching about the mouse and the click. Yeah. And according to the girl, the teacher was, when he says a single click, he'll hit the table once. And then when he says a double click, he'll hit the table twice. You know, but when they got a computer, everything changed. So those are the kinds of situations that we have.
These computers are going to the teachers.
The computers are not going to teachers.
Oh,
the 65,000 that government is. In fact, there are two interventions here now. Okay. There is one that is targeted at teachers, and there's one that is targeted at the school, for that matter, to ensure that the computers are there and will be used for teaching and learning. Okay, the 65,000 is actually targeting teachers and to enable them to have access to laptops that they can use and use also to affect their teaching and learning.
So the question I'm asking is that the teachers have the access to all of that, their pupils don't. How does that affect the child? How's a teacher able to use it to really spread this ICT message to a class of, say, 30 or 40?
Well, let me answer simply that the teacher will use the laptop both for the preparation of his own lesson notes. Okay. We are making quite a lot of effort in terms of ensuring that teachers use computers to develop their lesson notes and be able to apply it in terms of a tool to guide the children to get exposure to ICT. Okay. So there are quite a number of significant uses for the teacher of a computer, and especially when the school also has one, and we're encouraging schools to build their ICT stock. We are sort of looking forward to a situation where what we call the overhead projectors, those one, LCD projectors, will be used in our schools as part of the teaching and learning process.
Okay. All right. Kofi, but really, as we talk about all of that, we've been talking about capitation as well. And we mentioned the figures for capitation grant for the 2010-2011, 15 million Ghana cedis paid for second and third terms. And also in the 2011-2012 academic year, 8 million Ghana cedis so far paid. What does that mean?
Yeah, it means that more and more children are beginning to add up to the numbers enjoying fee-free basic education. Currently, the number is about 5.5 million, and we didn't start from 5.5 million in 2005, right? So it means that progressively, more and more children are beginning to come under the umbrella of fee-free basic education.
Can you feel it? From where you sit and from what you do, Action for Rural Education, do you feel this?
Yeah, I think on the issue of capitation grant, it is broadly felt from the kindergarten through, especially at the kindergarten level. Don't forget that when the policy started, kindergartens were not, they were under the Ministry of Manpower, that's the Department of Social Welfare. And then progressively, the kindergartens were migrated onto the Ghana Education Service. And that's, that huge numbers of kindergarten children became beneficiaries of the capitation grant. And the numbers keep adding up. Every year about 850,000 new children enroll into basic school in Ghana. And so every other year, you are welcoming about 850,000 children into a world of fee-free education. And that obviously must be felt.
And we've been talking about some BEC subsidy, government absorbing basic education certificate examination fees, actually, of all registered students, both public and private. Are you able to throw a little bit more light on that, Charles? How different is that from capitation? How different does that work, and what's the purpose?
Yes, the BEC subsidy is paid on the amount of money that the West African Examinations Council present to government, reflecting the cost of conducting the examination. Okay. Now, government takes 70% of that amount across board, public and private, of all the candidates, and pays ahead to the West African Examinations Council, and that covers every child who is doing the BEC in every year. Well, there's a 30% bit, which it's managed by the parents along the line.
Okay, but the question was that someone can take up the whole 100%. Why pay for them?
Yes, I mean, and again, you see, that's the issue of a real assessment of the needs of the children that we have. That's the point where I believe we'll be growing into over time.
Because someone was saying that it should be need based.
Yes, that's right.
So that we are able to extend further to those who don't have it. Because you may say for everybody and all of that, but as a matter of fact, the cake may be bigger for the needy if it was just the needy that shared it. And then when you have to share it with those who don't even need it, are able to bake their own cake at home, then really you end up having smaller pieces. You know. So perhaps that's something we should consider, Kofi.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily it is an issue worthy of consideration at this point. Don't forget that basic education is a right. And irrespective of where you are enjoying that right, whether you are in public or private, the government has a commitment to ensure that you have enjoyable, free, quality basic education.
You see, free compulsory universal basic education, as many argue, doesn't mean that I can set up a school and everybody who comes there privately is also supposed to come there for free and textbook and all of that. And that it is largely a public sector.
Yeah, that's not
Am I right?
Yeah, I understand it perfectly.
Absolutely. So if that being the case, I don't think that it's easy to swallow your.
That's
your
not exactly the point.
Okay.
The point I was building upon, which I almost completed, was that government pays capitation grant to only public basic schools.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that those children attending private basic schools are too well off that they don't need it. You understand? Now, if government keeps omitting basic people attending private basic school from capitation grant, it doesn't mean that any other social intervention in basic education should keep ignoring them. That's the point I want to make. That if those people attending private basic schools are not enjoying capitation grant, they should at a point enjoy something from government.
But this is the point. 100 students are sharing 100 oranges. 50 of them can buy their own orange.
No, that is not the point. 50 of them cannot buy their orange because you go to districts like Amasaman. Amasaman is Ga West. Go to Ga West.
No, you see, you know
Amasaman, it's Ga West.
Let's not make a fetish about the 50% example because I'm sure you get my drift. It's not to say that half of them can. I'm saying there's a percentage that can take up their own thing. And whether we like it or not, as I sit here, for example, I know people, like myself, all those who take our children to certain schools and all that, and will be happy to pay some fees and all that. And also I'm aware that perhaps some people who live close by need it more than I do because they, as a matter of fact, cannot afford it. If you pay for me and pay for them as well, if all the resources you have is 10 Ghana cedis, you are sharing it for us. But if you reserve the resource for them and exclude me, they are likely, if you are going, that's your budget, to get a higher chunk of it. That's the point. Does it make sense to you, Charles?
Side of the coin.
It does, but and again, I say that is the point that we are hoping we can get to. At least there's a recognition that there are some people within the group of children that we pay for who necessarily do not even need that money. And the calls have come. I mean, why don't you make it more targeted and efficient targeting of it? But again, it's also a contribution of the government to a particular age group. So it gets very difficult to sort of discriminate for that matter and to say that, well, you don't need it and all of it. I mean, let's look at children. Children are always children. They would always have, you got this and I didn't get it. Whether they have it or not, they will still want it. So again, when you take them as children, then you want to do something for them, even if they think they might not need it.
How critical is it to distribute 3 million school uniforms, Kofi, as we look at our education system, really? Is it something that is so critical? 3 million school uniforms to children?
Yeah, I think the idea behind the school uniform it's a good idea because before government introduced that intervention, we have piloted the distribution of school uniforms for students in the whole of Enzima East District in 2003, 2004. And we were able to have empirical data on how the availability of a shoe, school uniform, exercise book, and then a file impacts on the child's enrollment, regularity, and punctuality.
And what did you find?
And there was a positive correlation. It means that children are more enticed, more encouraged to go to school, and happy to be in school when they have school uniforms and when they have shoes, when they have free size books. They don't feel alienated comparing themselves to their colleagues who might have, some. So, and that is reflecting, because the figures the figures that were provided by the Minister of Education today points out to the fact that there are increasing trends in enrollment. And when you are providing things like free school uniforms, you expect people who hitherto were not in school, to go to school, because now they have new dresses, new shirts and shorts, and they want to be in school. It is natural.
I want us to talk about the new student loan scheme that is in the offing, and how new it is really. What's so different? Charles, as I said, we also hear that there's a new student loan scheme in the offing, and actually, what I gather is that the scheme will take into consideration the individual and family financial situation of applicants before determining the loan amount to be paid to them, as something we have been discussing relative to basic level, but it seems at the tertiary level, that is the focus. What's so different about the scheme now?
Yeah, what is different is that in the past, you were getting uniform amounts for all the students. The Students' Loan Trust did a very good study of how it will conduct the means testing process. And it took all the analysis from the quintiles in Ghana and focused more on the fifth quintile and looked at the economic challenges of people in the fifth quintile and came to the point that many of the students who came from families that were within the fifth quintile will require more than those families that were in the first quintile, which had enough resources to go by. And those were the conditions that the loan scheme would be using to be able to determine how to allocate resources to the loans to the students. It was considered that was an equitable way of providing the loan facility, and that it will go to help a lot more of what we call many of the poor students who are coming into university.
I will just cast my mind back. I remember the last loan I took is at Legon. Was 350,000 or 400. It will be 40 or 35 Ghana cedis today for a semester. And of course, in real terms, it may not be the same amount of money, but I'm casting my mind to it and saying, wow, those were interesting times. And it was uniform for everybody, irrespective of need. But that would be tough, Kofi, don't you think? Determining need. I mean, because in a country where we have statistical challenges, and that's a reality. We have deep statistical challenges. It's not easy to even tell unemployment or employment figures. We don't have house numbering in this country across most places. And I'm sure those are some of the things we'll be looking at. Where do you live? What income bracket are you in? Which part of the city are you? What access do you have? How big is your house? To determine where you belong. And that's what we've been talking about, the different concerns, for example, for that purpose. Is this going to be an easy determination to make?
Well, it's not expected to be easy. But, because of the comparatively lower numbers of tertiary students as compared to doing same for basic schools,
but we still have about 100,000.
Well,
that's
yeah.
a lot.
It's not a lot, because at the institutional level, the University of Ghana, maximum 35,000.
Okay.
At the institutional level, if you break it down to the institutional level, it is possible.
Yeah.
We have 10 polytechnics, averagely about 800 or 1,000. It is possible at the institutional level. What I don't know is
institutional level to make all this determination.
Yeah.
How is it easy? Okay, you're saying it's not expected to be easy, but I'm asking myself, at the institutional level, even if University of Ghana alone was to make this determination, how long will it take?
Yeah, it will take quite
People
some
don't
time.
even have home addresses.
No, you see, the point is that the data required should either be with the census guys or with the NIA guys. You understand? Now, they are not going to solely base their data on what you tell them.
But the census figures have not even come out at this stage.
Yeah, no,
For how many years?
I'm just making a point that...
I'm asking you practical questions. And I'm trying to bring out the reality on the ground.
The
because I don't want to allow you to make it sound easier than it really
the
is.
service is saying that they'll bring it
me.
out this year. So let's expect that. Once we have that data available in our system, right, the students' own voluntary data will only be used to sort of compare with what we have in the system. What I'm saying is that you can't do any meaningful exercise like this basing your data on what the student tells you.
Okay.
And for you to triangulate what the student tells you, you will need that backup from the Statistical Service or the National Identification Authority.
Right.
And we have that resource, so it should be possible, albeit not that easy.
But let me add that a lot of the information for determining the means will be provided by the students themselves. In fact, the study provided very useful information and data around how the Students' Loans Trust will conduct and provide information, the issues that the students will have to respond to. So there's a clear application this time round, and once you apply, you state exactly what course you're doing, every detail about yourself you are stating. So again, you are likely to be at risk if you provide wrong information. You might not get a loan at all. Wow. So it's one of the things that we want to use to just ensure that everybody does right by ensuring that you get the requisite amount of money that you need to go through the course.
We talk about schools being upgraded, some 2,300 or so, and what kind of upgrading are we talking about? What's the nature? What's the form? What are the costs? What are the sources of funding?
The upgrade are largely in the form of infrastructural improvements, because there are so many schools which have not seen renovations for a very long time for reasons that we all know, and others also need additional facilities that they have not had for also a very long time. So the upgrading process is just to ensure that every school has the requisite facilities that will enable teaching and learning activities to go on quite smoothly. The resources are coming from both GOG sources and the GET Fund. We have not had, well, especially at the tertiary and secondary levels, a lot of donor resources to do some of these upgrading. In fact, the last resource we had, most recent one, is the one from the ADB, which covered 25 senior high schools. But government is providing quite a significant amount of the resource.
Interesting. Kofi, do you think there's enough emphasis on science education?
I think there are ongoing efforts to revamp science resource centers. I think about 56 or so science resource centers in senior high schools, and provide science resource centers for schools without them at all. And that is one of the key priorities of society, that we need to provide equipment, resource science resource centers. But closely related to that is the issue of secondary education. Let me say that society, all over the year, have kept saying that if you want to expand secondary education access, the way to go is not the modernization of secondary school. I must admit that we are happy that for the first time, government has also aligned itself with that thinking. It is cheaper to expand access to secondary education if you do that using the community, or what you call the day approach. Because the cost of boarding school fees for a year is about 328.
So should we demodernize our schools?
Of course.
All of them?
No, not all of them. But you don't expand secondary education on grounds of modernization.
But you said, of course, to the modernization.
Yeah,
so
expanding.
Okay.
If you are building new schools, you don't build new boarding schools.
Oh, okay.
You build new community day schools.
But you don't demodernize the existing ones.
No.
Because my question was, do you demodernize? And you said,
no.
So
as you expand access,
you should actually expand on a day basis, community basis.
Let's expand them on a community basis. That is cheaper. The school fees of a day student is about 11 cedis compared to 328 cedis of that of a boarding school, just because of the feeding grant is so huge. So let's expand secondary education using the day or the community day school approach.
But the argument is also being put across that sometimes it is not just the direct measurement of some figures, payment, etc., and that the total value of say modernization, etc., is much bigger than what is paid. That, for example, in the First Republic, the whole idea was to desensitize us as a people with regard to our ethnic differences, where we came from. People from up north met people from yonder and beyond in school, and somehow married them and all those things. And that somehow it had led to a larger benefit of a diffusion of our society. Charles, what do you make of that argument?
Yeah, that's very true, but times have changed. And I think this country has benefited a lot from that policy. And now it has become necessary for us to look at things more objectively, especially as we have some significant challenges going forward. I know that there is a huge pros and cons group in terms of this modernization issues, but I think that when we start thinking about the means and the needs, The other argument that some people have put up is that, well, you can go to a boarding school, but you have to pay every single cost for being there. I mean, if you look at the current numbers in secondary schools, you will discover that the people who have access to what most people refer to as good schools are those whose parents have taken them through the schools where they have paid money. And then they come into the secondary school and they have free education. I mean, there's a little bit of unfairness in there. I mean, if you can pay 20 million for your child at primary school, well, go ahead and then when you go to Wesley Girls and you are in the boarding house, pay the 20 million too. Because you want a certain, unquote, quality of education from Wesley Girls that you have identified to provide it. So pay and let others who cannot pay also come in and pay their 11 Ghana cedis and get the same value of education. So this has not gone down with a lot of people, and then there's also the equity thing. So it's a whole wide range of issues in that, and it will be important for us to, I mean, look at it dispassionately, either through some very organized forum where people can share their views, and then we'll look at it, and then allow other organs of state to bring us together as one people, and because there will always be different people in the class from different ethnic groups, even if they are boarders and day students.
And as someone says, this time it's possible to be sitting in Accra and still be in constant touch with somebody in Berlin. And that's the reason why perhaps the modernization, we can still modernize in an ICT manner. And so perhaps the physical modernization may have lost a bit of its relevance. Somehow, I never want to bring things like this to a close because education is such an important thing, but we have to go. We've actually exceeded our time. There's a text message here from Right Holy Bombastic De Fantastic. Interesting name. And it says, if that's the case, then it's good, but we have only one SHS and no tertiary institution, no big hospital, one police station, 3 banks, poor roads, poor communication network in Bosome Freho constituency in Ashanti region. Why? Are we not part of Ghana? Don't we have an MP? All we have is multi-TV. Wow. You couldn't have put it any better.
Multi-TV is good for you.
It's good for him. Let's take final words from you. Kofi, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, I think in summary, we have made some progress in the past year in expanding access to education. The key challenge remains how to improve the quality. And moving forward, this is an election year. We don't know which government will take over or which government will continue to be in power in next year. But how we want to say is that the current review of the education system, education sector is ongoing at LAPAM. What we are saying is that whoever takes over or whoever happens to be in authority next year, whatever issues, recommendations being made should be carried through and should not be truncated. We need to continue this process until we get to where we want to get to. There's no need for any political interference.
Great, Charles.
Well, there's a lot to learn among the people of Ghana when it comes to the issue of education. And for me, I think that what we need is a general understanding and a pulling together of all of us in terms of thinking through what are the right steps that we need to follow. The government and the Ministry of Education and Ghana Education Service are making every effort to ensure that we inject what is needed as quality in the education system in the midst of all the serious challenges that we have. But we still believe that we can make that progress and make that mark if we are able to get everybody's support to help us to do the things that are right for the children of this country.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the insightful contributions you always bring to the show whenever you join us. Mr. Charles Chega, on my immediate left, is Deputy Director General, Ghana Education Service. Mr. Kofi Asare is Executive Director, Action for Rural Development. Thank you very much, sirs, for your time with us.